If you can grab a seat. Recording in progress. Welcome to those watching remotely. Welcome to those of you who are here in Gaithersburg. I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and welcome to our annual legislative wrap-up. We have a bunch of party leaders, elected officials, candidates, and important constituents, which means all of you, because you are all very important to us. We had a really successful 90-day session, and we want to tell you all about it and then take your questions. We will try to monitor the chat as well in the live stream, so feel free to add questions there. But I'm going to ask you if you would put your phones on silent or vibrate. That would be great, so we don't have a ton of distractions. And we're not going to mute baby Julian because that would be impossible, and he's adorable. So I'm going to start by just acknowledging that Ellie Shaw Belblidia is out of the country, but she has been doing amazing work for the District 17 Democratic Club for so many years. She helped set all of this up. So in absentia, can we just thank Ellie? I also want to make sure that I recognize the amazing Michael Tardif of the Democratic Central Committee, who is always the guy who shows up and makes technology work and just has a magic wand, and he's so kind to give of his time. So each of us will talk about what we do. We do want to acknowledge that this is Kumar Barve's very last legislative wrap-up. And to be clear, we are not clapping because we're excited about that. But 32 plus years, 32 plus years, that is a lot of legislative sessions and a lot of money brought back, a lot of bills passed, a lot of leadership for our constituents. So we have been very lucky to have him representing us. Michael, the stream is working okay? People can hear from home. Awesome. Okay, so I want to, I'm going to recognize the elected officials and candidates, but since some folks wander in late, I think we'll pause on that a little bit. And so do you guys want to go senior to junior or junior to senior? I usually start junior to senior. What's your preference?
It's your call. I prefer to go last.
Yeah.
Actually,
okay. So all that cleanup. We're going to start with our newest delegate, Joe Vogel, who will tell you about what he has accomplished in Annapolis.
It's always junior to senior, and I always get surprised by it. Well, good morning, everyone. Good to be here today, and so good to see so many friends. I'll start by talking about the legislation that I sponsored that we were able to get passed. I want to mention some of the pieces of legislation that I worked on, or that the legislature worked on, or that I co-sponsored, that we were also able to get passed, and then I'll talk about some of those pieces of legislation that we weren't able to get passed, but I'm definitely bringing back next year, and we're going to get them done next year. I came into the legislature this year with 3 priorities. First, to address the mental health crisis that we're seeing in our state, in particular in our schools. Second, to address the fentanyl overdose epidemic that we've really seen it for a while across our state, but right now we're seeing a devastating surge here in Montgomery County. And then the surge in hate crimes that we're all too familiar with. So the first bill that I sponsored was a bill to recruit and retain more mental health professionals in our public schools. And I see Jovi here with MCA, and I see Julie Yang. Julie and I talked about this issue quite a bit as I was working on the legislation. So there was an existing program, the Janet Hoffman, a different Hoffman, the Janet Hoffman Loan Assistance Repayment Program that provides repayment of student debt for a range of different professionals, including classroom teachers. It did not, mental health professionals, so school psychologists, school social workers, school counselors were ineligible for the program. So my approach was to expand eligibility to the existing program and make it as easy as possible for those professionals to get that debt relief. So over the course of session, what happened was that bill that I sponsored got amended into the Governor's Educator Shortage Act as part of that big bill to address the overall lack of educators in our state, the shortage of educators. And in the process of that bill being amended, we also increased the funding to the Janet Hoffman Loan Assistance Repayment Program from $1.4 million to $5 million, which is exciting. Thank you. So what that means is that right now, any school psychologist, school social worker, school counselor, or those who are working in those fields in a related, maybe if you're an administrator, right, and working in a mental health capacity in a school, you are eligible now for up to $30,000 of debt forgiveness over the course of 3 years, assuming that you work in a public school for at least 2 years. There was one thing that I thought was really important that we maintained from my original legislation, was that when it comes to this program in particular, I don't care where you went to school for your school psychology or school social work degree. You could have gone to school in California for all I care about. If you come work in Maryland and help us address our shortage, come, right? So we were able to maintain that in the final bill. There was conversation about amending that out. We just don't have enough students in Maryland schools. That has to change, right? We should create more pipelines, but we don't have enough students in Maryland school psychology and school social work programs right now in our state to address that shortage. So I really feel strongly about the fact that we need to be bringing professionals in from other states. So if you know someone that is a school social worker in Virginia or a school psychologist in Pennsylvania who has student debt, tell them to come to Maryland, work in our public schools, and get their debt forgiven. So really excited about the passage of the Educator Shortage Act, which includes the provisions of my bill. Second, we are seeing what I was in Hagerstown yesterday and was having a conversation with folks about the opioid overdose epidemic there. I've had conversations with folks about it here in Montgomery County schools, seeing the reality across the state of just how serious this crisis is and how many people are dying. Thousands of people are dying in our state, and we are seeing countless overdoses in our state every single day. But the reality is that I think we're undercounting. Because there was a report that was brought to me by a family at the very beginning of the legislative session that showed, it was conducted by the University of Maryland, that in hospitals, only 5% of suspected drug overdose patients are tested for fentanyl in their toxicology screenings. Only 5%. And of those tests, close to 50% come back positive. So for me, it reminded me a bit about COVID when we were undercounting the number of COVID cases. And we're not getting clarity of two things: just how serious this fentanyl overdose epidemic is and where we're seeing trends and clusters of cases. So I passed a bill to close that, to address the gap of what I call the hospital fentanyl testing gap. So right now, as of October 1st, a hospital that conducts a urine toxicology screening on a patient who is suspected to be experiencing a drug overdose, you are required to test for fentanyl as well as part of that test. And we went one step further. We created a reporting system through the State Health Exchange, through CRIS, where now hospitals have to anonymously report the data through the State Health Exchange to the Opioid Operational Command Center, headed by my friend, Secretary Emily Keller. I talk to her about this almost every day at this point, and we were talking yesterday. And they are now already able to see that data. And I went to Shady Grove Hospital the other day and had a conversation with their lab technician there. And they move quick at Shady Grove Hospital, and they're already complying with both of those requirements in the bill. They're testing for fentanyl in every single urine drug toxicology screening. They're already seeing an uptick in the number of positive test results, which is horrifying to hear about, but we're seeing the real numbers now. And they're already the lab technician said, "You told me to transmit the data, we're transmitting the data." So the day that I visited, they had already started transmitting that data through the State Health Exchange. I think this is an important step forward in having a data-driven response to the fentanyl overdose epidemic, because now the State Opioid Operational Command Center will be able to see that live, timely, accurate data. Last bill that I was really excited that we were able to get passed was my bill to create a state commission on hate crime prevention and response. The surge in hate crimes that we are seeing, we've all heard of incidents in our schools. We heard of the incident at the supermarket here in Gaithersburg, where a Jewish man was harassed on his way into the supermarket with people yelling, "Do it for Kanye," right? We are seeing the hate that is proliferating online doesn't end online. It has real consequences in our communities, and it's had real consequences in our community right here at home. We see the graffiti I mean, it really is troubling. So the Attorney General's office had an existing task force on hate crimes. There were two issues. One, I don't think that every group that had to be on that task force was on that task force. It was not an official commission, so it didn't have all the resources that an official commission would have, and it was being supported financially. The resources were coming from a Department of Justice grant that was going to expire next year, and that they were going to have to reapply for without certainty of getting those resources. So the bill that I passed turns that task force into a permanent commission, expands the membership to include an LGBTQ plus organization, an organization representing the Asian American community, two communities that have also been impacted in a really horrific way by the rise in hate crimes. And it provides them with permanent funding moving forward to be able to retain their assistant attorney general and an administrative support staffer who helps the commission operate. And the commission, the bill requires the commission to do one more thing. In the next year and a half, they are required to produce two reports, one to the legislature and one to state agencies, directing us with what legislation and what policies should be enacted at a state level to address the surge in hate crimes. Because what we're seeing with these bills that are introduced, as good as they are, right, to address the rise in hate crimes, it's a piecemeal approach. And we need to have a comprehensive look at the problem with input from the communities that are most impacted by the problem to make sure that the solutions that we're coming up with are the ones that are going to be most effective at addressing the surge in hate crimes. Two bills that I was really excited about, I'll touch on briefly. One was a bill, we have we are in the midst of a climate emergency. There is no denying that. And Maryland is leading the way, thanks to Chairman Barve, in no small part, leading the way on climate action. But I think we can do more because we have an incredible research and development infrastructure here in our state. And there are incredible startups that are doing work on the climate front right now here in Maryland, but they're not getting the support that they need. So I had long conversations with the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator. They help early stage startups in the climate space grow in our state. So I sponsored a bill to create, with the co-sponsorship of Chairman Barve, to create a fund, a $500,000, an investment fund for early stage climate startups. So early stage climate startups, I feel like I'm saying that every 5 seconds now, would have received investments that they would have had to repay, and they would have been administered by the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator. And the beauty of the program was that according to MEIA and their projections, within 7 years, they would have received a full return on their initial investment, and we would have helped these climate startups grow significantly. So I'm going to bring that bill back next year. I'm already having conversations with MEIA to see how we can strengthen it and make sure that it passes. Another bill that I was really excited about was related to local journalism and small businesses. We have seen a devastating decline in local journalism here in our state, and really across the country, with newsrooms closing. And the press is essential to a strong democracy. But if these local newsrooms are closing, who is holding our local government leaders accountable? Who is informing the public on the issues? So I sponsored a bill that was actually tried on the federal level, and it didn't pass on the federal level, but we tried a version of it here to provide tax credits to small businesses that are advertising in local news sources. It's a win-win, a win for small businesses and a win for local news sources. I did it. I sponsored the bill in collaboration with a national organization working to save local journalism, and we're going to bring it back next year and see if we can get it done. The legislature, I'm sure my colleagues will talk about this more in depth as well. We passed significant legislation to move one step further in codifying reproductive freedom in the Maryland Constitution. That's right. We passed significant legislation to respond to the Supreme Court's Bruin decision to address the rise in gun violence here in our state and across the country. And we made significant advancements on everything from climate action to housing to transportation. So it was a really productive and effective legislative session. It is an honor to represent all of you in Annapolis. And I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues here and whoever the next delegate from District 17 is. I'm assuming that we're going to take questions at the end, but thank you all so much.
Joe Vogel, our new delegate, who has taken Annapolis by storm. We didn't mention that he serves on the Ways and Means Committee, and our other star on the Ways and Means Committee is Delegate Julie Palakovich Carr, in her second term now in the House and chair of the Montgomery County delegation, which is no small feat. That takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. So Delegate Palakovich Carr.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming in person. For participants on Zoom, I'm really excited that we were able to make this work out in terms of having a hybrid meeting. I think this is clearly serving people well, given the number of people in the room and the number of people on Zoom. Well, it really was a very productive session, but I think a very low-key session. I think that really is a testament to how well and how smoothly things are working in the legislature, especially with Governor Moore, Lieutenant Governor Miller, but also our other new, still relatively new statewide elected officials, Comptroller Brooke Learman, and Attorney General Anthony Brown. And like I said, it was a productive session, but kind of quiet. And actually, probably the biggest surprise for me this session was just how much things were back to normal, to the before times before the pandemic. But it really was great. It meant that we had a lot more stakeholders and residents coming to visit us in Annapolis, and I always appreciate that. So thank you to the folks who are participating today and to everyone who has been part of the legislative process this session. Whether you came to Annapolis or called us or emailed us, we really do appreciate hearing from all of you and having you be part of the process and hearing what your thoughts and concerns are. Well, I figured I would just highlight a couple of the initiatives that passed from the administration, some of the things that are going on in terms of our delegation and on my committee, and then a few of my bills as well. So this session, the Moore-Miller administration had 10 priority bills, all of which passed. One of the ones that came through the Ways and Means Committee really is very impactful in terms of helping families that are in poverty, especially families that have children. Because in spite of being one of the wealthiest counties in one of the wealthiest states in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, we still have an awful lot of kids who are growing up in poverty. It's 1 in 8 kids in Maryland, which is just far too many. And that's not just, the Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, just Baltimore City. There are lots of kids here in Montgomery County, here in Gaithersburg, here in Rockville, whose families need more support. So the Family Prosperity Act was one of the administration's bills that we passed this session. That made 2 really important changes in terms of our tax code. I think a lot of you know that I love tax policy and really see what the value of working on tax policy is in terms of pursuing like the social reforms and changes that we want to make. So this legislation made permanent some changes to the earned income tax credit, which has kind of a technical name, but it really is a very targeted tax credit for low to middle income working people, especially those who have kids, but not exclusively. And it's a federal credit, a state credit, and actually a Montgomery County credit as well, very targeted to helping people get a leg up out of poverty. And it's been very effective. In the decades it's been in existence in America, it's been considered to be the largest and most effective anti-poverty program, not just tax credit, but anti-poverty program in America's history. So I was very proud that we could make permanent the expansions we did a couple of years ago, which notably made sure that immigrant taxpayers in our state and mixed status families could be eligible for our state and actually Montgomery County's credit. They are excluded under the federal credit, unfortunately, even though they are paying into and contributing to our society in a variety of ways, including paying taxes. But that legislation also included a very big expansion of our state's child tax credit. This is actually something that Senator Nancy King and I have been working on for 4 years. And we had gotten the credit established a couple years ago, but this was a big expansion that we passed this session. I was really thrilled last fall when I approached the incoming administration about taking this on and making it part of their priority for ending childhood poverty in Maryland. And they were very, eager to get working on this. So under the legislation we passed this session, an additional 40,000 families will qualify for the credit, and it's really going to be meaningful for those families. Also on the family front, and in terms of a kind of a returning issue this session, is paid family leave. Folks might recall that last session we kind of put a down payment on a new paid family leave insurance system in Maryland, but there were a lot of technical details that still had to get figured out. So this session we came back, we passed legislation. So the good news is starting January 1, 2026, anybody who's working in the state of Maryland will be able to access up to 12 weeks of paid family leave. So if they have a new child, they have a spouse who has medical issues, they are caring for an aging parent, that they can get 12 weeks of paid leave. And this will, both the employer and the employee will be paying into this system over time so that when someone needs to take advantage of it, it's there. It's a safety net for people. We know what a benefit that is for working people, especially those who don't have access to paid leave now. But it's also a big benefit for our employers. Many smaller employers can't afford to offer this, on their own, but this really is a very affordable way for everyone to provide this kind of social benefit. So this is a good thing to be looking forward to a few years down the road. People may start hearing from their employers in the near future. In about another year and change is when the contributions will start. So people will see a very modest up to a 1% contribution out of their pay towards this new system if your employer doesn't already offer paid leave. So switching, I guess, to some of the other hats that I wear, this session I did become chair of the Early Childhood Subcommittee on the House Ways and Means Committee. And we're very focused on providing access to high quality, affordable childcare. And of course, here in Montgomery County, we have a lot of great options in terms of childcare, but we still are considered to be an underserved community. That is true in most parts of Maryland, either that there's not enough providers or it's just not affordable and accessible for families. But high quality early child care, it really is very important to making sure that these kids have the skills that they need so that they can be successful in kindergarten and years beyond. So this session, we passed several bills trying to address this issue in terms of ensuring access to care, especially for lower income families. We made some changes to our state's child care scholarship program. It's basically the state subsidy for low income families to access childcare that is high quality, as well as expanded our state's publicly funded full day pre-K, which is something that is just kind of getting up and running as part of the blueprint for Maryland's future. And again, some of you might remember a few years ago, the legislation we passed on that front, which is really our state's landmark education reform law, to make a number of changes to make sure that Maryland has the best public schools in the nation, again, because we used to. So a lot of exciting things happening on that front, still a lot more work that needs to be done. Switching hats, the Montgomery County House delegation, I have served as chair since last fall for the delegation. Our two big priorities this session were around public transportation, specifically bus rapid transit, as well as the new Institute for Health Computing that is going to be developed in North Bethesda at what was formerly the White Flint Metro site, now the North Bethesda Metro site. I still have to remind myself of the new name. BRT, bus rapid transit, the county, if you're not familiar, has a very robust plan for interconnected lines throughout the county. There's one line that's already up and running, others that are in development. Actually, if you live in Rockville, the Beers Mill corridor will be coming online in the coming years. But 355 is kind of the big project, just because of how long it is and how much of the county that it'll serve. So this has been something that the delegation, the county, our federal delegation have been working very closely on in terms of figuring out how to finance that project. And certainly the federal infrastructure dollars are going to be helpful, but it doesn't cover the whole thing. So the last few sessions, our delegation has been very successful in getting one-time and ongoing funding to help support the build out of BRT. And this session, we got kind of a seemingly minor but important technical change made so that the county can leverage the existing tens of millions of dollars that it's getting each year from the state and turn that through bonding into hundreds of millions of dollars each year. So that certainly will help with the build out of bus rapid transit on 355. The Institute for Health Computing is going to be a new research center based at the Metro station there in North Bethesda. It is a partnership that'll be run through the University of Maryland, but in partnership with the county, the state, and our federal delegation, who's also gotten some funding for that. This session, we were successful in getting a few $1 million for the planning, basically, so they can start the design work. Although they have a new site identified, the logistics of what's going to be at this new research center has already been established, but this way we can actually work towards the building out of the bricks and mortar of it. It's a very exciting developments there, just south of our district. So in terms of my own legislation, I had 5 bills that passed this session. 3 have been signed into law already. The last 2 will get signed this week. Everything from working on making sure that kids who have very severe food allergies have adequate protections while they're in public school, to updating our state's cryptocurrency laws, or rather to reflect the fact that we have cryptocurrency in some of our election laws and other things needed to be updated to address that. And also taking on a small but important change in terms of unemployment. And actually, I want to give shout out to my chief of staff, Matt Harrington, who's here, who's the brainchild on this bill. basically to make sure that when somebody who's unemployed and is getting unemployment benefits in the state, if there's a mistake that wasn't their fault, like if their employer made a mistake, or sometimes the Department of Labor makes a mistake, that the out of work Marylander isn't being held responsible in a really harmful way in terms of recouping that money back to the state. Lastly, I just want to touch on actually one of my bills that didn't quite make it this session, but I know is of concern for a lot of people in the district, and that has to do with vehicles that are excessively loud, like have an illegally modified exhaust. I see a lot of nodding heads. I probably have heard from more people on this issue than probably most issues in the legislature the last few years. Yeah, we know it's a big quality of life issue, throughout the district, but really throughout the state. There is new emerging technology that really is just kind of coming to market at this point that works like a speed camera, but it's a sound camera. So it can detect these excessively loud vehicles, snap a picture of the license plate, take a video, and then send a warning or ultimately a citation to the vehicle owner. And there's other places that have been testing this technology, including in New York City for the last almost 2 years. And it looks very promising. So we had a bill this session that would allow local governments, whether municipalities or counties, to take advantage of this if they wanted to. Passed the Senate, didn't make it in the House. We're going to try again next year. But I mean, this really just makes sense. Montgomery County, City of Rockville, City of Gaithersburg have all expressed an interest in having just the option on the table to be able to use this. So we're hoping we'll get that done next session. And I think with that, close, we'll take questions. Again, just want to thank everybody for your participation in the legislative process.
So Delegate Palakovich Carr mentioned Matt Harrington, who's wonderful. I want to give a shout out to all of our staff and interns who helped us be successful, because without them, we can't do what we do in Annapolis and in the district. And I've got an intern dad in the audience. And so, but I've got, we all have lots of people who put in the work and all that. I said I was going to wait to introduce elected officials for the latecomers, which turned out to be good because they were latecomers. So before I do that, though, I want to make sure that everyone watching at home, Mr. Mayor, big push here. Don't worry, I'm doing it. And Lenny Levy is wearing his Gaithersburg Book Festival t-shirt, but a week from today, one of the best book festivals in the country. It's going to be in Gaithersburg. Make sure you know that it's no longer at City Hall. It's at Boer Park, right on 355, adjacent to Gaithersburg High School. There are all genres and all literature that will appeal to all ages, and free parking, free entry. Bring your family, bring friends, and celebrate the written word. So make sure you do that. Elected officials, I want to start off by recognizing our county elected official, county council member Lori Ann Sales is here. City council members, Ryan Spiegel from Gaithersburg, Monique Ashton from Rockville, Julie Yang on our school board. I recognized from the Central Committee, Michael Tardif, but Jennifer Hosey is here as well from the Central Committee. And there are, and we're going to, oh, CC Grant, sorry, CC is here also from the Central Committee. Adam, don't block CC, it's a bad move, yeah. And David Miles is with us on Zoom, Rockville City Council member, Dr. David. Thank you, Michael. We, as I'm pausing before we have Kumar come up, but there are a lot of people, and Kumar and I are really clear. We are not going to be filling Kumar's seat because, first off, he doesn't own it, and second off, because it's the people's seat, and he has filled it in his extraordinary way for 32 sessions, but a new person will be selected in the next couple of weeks, and they will do it their way. And there are a number of people who have put their hat in and expressed interest. And if you're not public yet and you want to be public now, great. If you don't want to be public here, that's fine too. We expect a number of wonderful candidates. And so if you would like to stand and say hello and identify yourself as a candidate to fill the anticipated vacancy on for the District 17 House of Delegates. So I'll start in the front and we'll just go back. Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Hoffman, former mayor of Rockville, and I've applied for the vacancy.
Let's go this side first. Ryan?
I'm Ryan Spiegel from the Gaithersburg City Council, and I'm the current chair of the Maryland Democratic Municipal Officials, and I've also put my name in for the vacancy. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joey Lopez. I currently work with Montgomery County Education Association running their Apple Ballot program. I live in King Farm, and I am running for the D17 vacancy.
Hi, my name is Carl Van Est. I'm a 3-time award winner in the city of Gaithersburg for my work in the environment. And I'm also a 21-year employee at the College Board, so I know a good amount about higher education. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you not yet to turn us around here, Michael, because we also have elections this year. And so if you are running in Rockville or in Gaithersburg this year and would like to introduce yourself, and it may be premature and you're not ready to do that publicly, but if you are, you may stand and we can acknowledge you too.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Van Graff. I'm an attorney in downtown Rockville, and I currently serve on the Public Policy Committee for the Rockford Chamber of Commerce, and I'm running for City Council in Rockville.
Oh.
Thank you, everyone. I have not publicly said this, so here we go. My name is Monique Ashton. I currently serve on the Rockville City Council. I'm also the president of the Maryland Municipal League Montgomery chapter, and I'm running for mayor.
Oh, whoops. Lights bad. There we go. Hello, folks. My name is Paul Scott. I live in the King Farm area in the city of Rockville. Currently, I'm on the Board of Trustees. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board of Trustees for the King Farm Citizens Assembly. I'm also a board member of the George B. Thomas Saturday School Learning Academy, and many of you are familiar with that program, 35 years in existence. I'm on the city's Transportation and Mobility Commission, and I'm running for City Council. Thank you very much. Good job.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kate Fulton. I have been fortunate enough to raise a family and build community in Rockville for the past 13 years. I live in the West End. I am also a lawyer, government executive, policymaker, and government administrator, and I am running for Rockville City Council.
Last but not least, so I'm Barry Jackson. I'm president of King Farm, as everybody knows. And I'm work for a nonprofit, and I'm running for Rockville City Council.
I just also want to acknowledge, thank you for clapping for every candidate. You're not going to be able to support all of these candidates, but every one of them has chosen to make the sacrifice and make the effort to put their name out there. And that's hard. So thanks to all of you who have served, who are serving, or who are proposing to serve in public office. And while we're at it, there are a lot of you who are precinct chairs and community democratic leaders. And I just want to acknowledge so many of you who have served on Central Committee or as precinct chairs and stuff. So just a quick round of applause for that. All right. The last thing on elections, I think everyone in this room and surely everyone watching from home knows that after more than 50 years in elective office, U.S. Senator Ben Cardin announced that he will not be seeking another 6-year term. And so first off, I want to thank him for his service and dedication. And second, that started off a bit of a domino effect. And so there are people who are looking at running for office. I just spoke to someone else who's running for US Senate this morning, and there are a lot of talented candidates. And then as they leave their positions, if they're in elective office, then that creates more dominoes and more folks looking at that. So I'm just going to encourage you, keep an open mind. It is a year before the next, before the primary. And so things will develop, but obviously get involved for the candidate or candidates of your choice as they come out, because there's a lot of talent out there. And speaking of talent, got to bring up our wonderful senior senator, senior delegate, most tenured, effective leader, my friend, Delegate Kumar Barve.
So many people running for office, and I thought the big turnout was for me. I'm going to go quickly through some of the highlights with respect to the environment, and then I'm going to wrap up by talking a little, having some observations that I've accumulated over the last 32 years, 33 sessions. So if I say 33 sessions, it sounds more like a third of a century. So maybe that's not such a great idea, but I mean, but in any case, let me just quickly go through some of the things that we did that I thought were significant with respect to the environment and transportation and housing. And that's the committee that I chair, the Environment and Transportation Committee. And one of the most significant things we did this year was to change the Forest Conservation Act in a way that really establishes the goal of achieving 40% forest cover in the state of Maryland. We're actually right now not too far off from that. And the city of Gaithersburg, I've been told by Council Member Ryan Spiegel, is actually at 40% right now. So that 39. Okay, well, you know, yeah, it's kind of like, anyway, we can round upwards. That's very, very close. And, you know, as a result of that, when we did this, we had to create some exemptions. We've made exemptions for multi-housing family units, apartment buildings. We made exemptions for transit-oriented development. There just doesn't make any sense to not put development near transit, and a couple of other exemptions that made a lot of sense that I won't go into. But I will say that, you know, we in the state of Maryland have, you know, I know that some environmental activists don't like the word incrementalism. And while we weren't incremental with respect to greenhouse gas reductions, we have been pretty aggressively incremental in most other environmental areas. And as a result of that, our policies work really well. We've never gone backward. And I hope that that'll continue to be the case after I step down and a new chair takes over my position. We also, very happy to say that we passed a bill to establish an environmental and natural resources crime unit in the office of the Attorney General. And this is something that's really been needed for a very, very long time. And it's going to begin the process of creating this position so that the governor will put real money into this so that we can start to more effectively enforce the great laws that we have on the books. I'm going to mention something that typically I wouldn't mention in Gaithersburg and Rockville, and it has to do with licenses and permits and stamps with respect to hunting. Now, why would I bring this up? This was a very, very interesting bill because it doubled the cost of getting a hunting license, but it put all of that money into education programs. It put it into a really neat program of migratory bird habitat. This is an interesting thing. Migratory birds that you may shoot here, they nest up in Canada. And we actually have a DNR, Department of Natural Resources folks up in Canada, making sure that the population is stable so that they won't have to, and if they have to, they'll shut down all the hunting. And that's the kind of cutting edge, really smart environmental policy that Maryland is known for. But when you double any kind of a fee or a tax, the Republicans don't like that. So ironically, the hunting community supported it, the environmental community supported it, and I had it be defended on the floor of the House by the Republican minority leader. And he did a great job. At one point, somebody asked about some aspect of Sunday hunting, and he simply stood up in his Eastern Shore accent and said, "Sunday hunting of migratory game birds has been illegal for 300 years. and which predates the United States of America, and that shut them all up. So that was a favorite moment for me. Let's see, another one that was sort of interesting was an oyster inspection and severance tax proposal that would have also, this is proposed by a Republican to double the oyster tax in order to perform a lot of functions that are very important. Well, naturally, I can't allow something like that to happen without me savagely making fun of my Republican colleagues. So we actually, in the committee, we ridiculed him for becoming a socialist. I actually went on my phone and I brought up the national anthem of the Soviet Union and played it. And it was funnier than hell. He appreciated it. We passed the tax, so everybody is happy. So we have substantially enhanced our offshore wind energy programs. And without going into any of the details, I just want you to know that as a matter of the law, we now have a state goal to achieve 8,500 megawatts of offshore wind capacity by the year 2031. And that's significant. Now all we have to do is invent the batteries to store all that energy. So, so in any case, we've also enhanced the Empower program, which is basically a program that sets aside money from the power generation industry to make it possible for people to employ and pay for technologies to save energy. And this is one of the many laws that require the Public Service Commission to do extra work. Yay me. And I'll get to why that's, well, I'll get to why that might be relevant in a second. We also, I'm not going to talk about that. You know, we passed a lot of bills with respect to community solar, extending a pilot program. We did an energy storage law, which is going to require the Public Service Commission to establish a Maryland energy storage program to set targets for cost-effective deployment of energy storage. And I'll get into why that's significant a little later on when I talk about the Public Service Commission. We are requiring, we basically are requiring and enhancing our ability to have medium duty and heavy duty zero emission vehicles. You know, it's trucks, basically. We're talking about box trucks and 18 wheelers. They're only 1% of the vehicles on the road, but they account for 25% of the pollution. And diesel vehicles are accountable for like one of the largest percentages of particulate, inhaled particulate pollution, which is where a lot of the disease vectors in our society are caused. And so we actually are putting, we're teaming up with California and 7 other states to enact the California Air Resource Board's advanced clean truck regulations. And so basically the Maryland Department of the Environment is really going to put us in a position where the manufacturers of electric, or excuse me, not electric, non-fossil fuel trucks have an incentive to sell in the state of Maryland, but significantly, this is not a mandate on any Maryland business. There won't be such a thing as a Maryland business being fined for not buying an electric van. One other thing you need to know is that in Western Maryland, we have Volvo and Mack Trucks, which is building electric vehicles. They have a union shop, and we worked with them, and they are completely in support of this law. So we're not hurting Maryland businesses or Maryland union workers in the course of doing this. And I think it's significant that in my committee, we try to work with everybody, including very conservative Republicans, the business community, labor community, the environmentalists, because oftentimes we can arrive at accommodations that make everybody happy. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens quite frequently. And then finally, I just wanted to mention a law that we passed that's going to basically require that all new housing units that have a separate garage, carport, or driveway have to have at least one dedicated parking space that would be available with electric vehicle supply equipment that is either fully installed or EV ready, meaning that you'll be able to, because of your enhanced electric panel, you'll be able to get the proper washer dryer plug to plug your electric car in we're also studying how we can do this with multi-housing, with apartment buildings. So really that's the future. My wife and I both drive electric cars. We're very lucky that in our underground parking, we just plug into a normal wall socket and they've decided not to charge us any money, but we'll see how they feel about that when half the cars are electric in the garage. Let's see. I'm not going to talk about on-farm composting. But we are beginning the process of really studying intensively the effect of forever chemicals like PFAS, they're called forever chemicals because once they're in your body, they're there for good, very much like lead. And so we have to move in the direction of finding a sensible way of taking those out of our lived environment. And just very quickly, we did something interesting with respect to transportation. We repealed a requirement that the Maryland Transit Administration has to increase public transit fares based on the Consumer Price Index. In other words, I'll just tell you my position. I really don't have a problem with public subsidies of transit because you can't have proper there we go. Somebody like that. You can't have proper transit without subsidies, and the entire point of the transit system is to get people out of their cars. But this is going to make it easier, especially in the Baltimore area, to encourage more people to drive in their cars. And then finally, this is a screw up on the part of my committee. Electric vehicle drivers had these nice little HOV stickers they could put on their car, and nobody complained about it, and we didn't think about it, and the law went out of effect last year, and suddenly we all had to pull our HOV stickers off of our cars. Well, never fear, we passed that law. And so for electric vehicles between now and I guess between October 1st is when the law will go into effect, and September 30th, 2025, if you have an electric vehicle, you will be able to pay a maximum of $20 for your little sticker so you can drive in the HOV lane. So I was very fortunate to be offered a position by Governor Wes Moore to join the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission is an agency that regulates electric power generation and distribution. It regulates natural gas. It regulates the telecom industry. And also, weirdly, it regulates Uber, Lyft, and taxis in Baltimore City and 3 other jurisdictions. So, and there are a few other things, but so this is very bittersweet for me. I have really loved every minute of being in the Maryland House of Delegates. It's been 32 years. And, the Maryland House and the Maryland government has changed substantially over those 32 years. There are more women, there are more Black folks and brown folks. There are openly gay folks, and people behave better. It's a funny thing. People have asked me why.
Really?
Yeah. Well, you had to see some of those old dinosaurs and the way they behaved with respect to women and with respect to Black people. And a friend of mine once said that, once you had more and more women winning election, the men started behaving better. And that's a very, I can back up that observation. It was a different place. Today, we have a very heterogeneous, very diverse and representative legislature that looks like Maryland. And that's something to be proud of. We have a legislature which, even with a Republican in office, functioned so much better than most state legislatures and certainly the federal government in DC. And I was really proud to be a part of it. I was proud to serve as the chairman of the Montgomery County House delegation. I was proud to be the majority leader for Speaker Mike Bush. I was proud, and I've been very happy to be the chair of the Environment and Transportation Committee. And I guess over the course of 30 years, I will say that there has been a tremendous amount of success. And I think that you cannot denigrate Maryland for not moving too quickly. We have actually moved in many instances very quickly, and we've been very successful. And I have no doubt that we will continue to be that. And I will say, as an observation, when I was elected in 1990, my first official vote was to vote to elect or to nominate Mike Gordon to be the chairman of the Montgomery County House delegation. He was the late delegate Mike Gordon. He represented Rockville and Gaithersburg, and at that time Garrett Park was in our district. And so my last official act as a delegate this coming up Monday will be to nominate and to help elect my chair of the Montgomery County delegation, Julie Palakovich Carr. So I've kind of come full circle from electing one Montgomery County Democrat from District 17 to another Montgomery County Democrat from District 17. And so between Julie, me, and Mike Gordon, we were kind of in charge for a very, very long time. So I will say that I'm going to the Public Service Commission. You're not going to see the last of me. I'm going to be stalking the Maryland House of Delegates. You will probably have to put out a restraining order. So in any case, thank you very much for everything. I've really enjoyed representing you and hearing from you. And and by the way, feel free to continue to contact me. I'm going to put my soon to be defunct business cards out on the table, because on the back are my not to be defunct cell phone number and email address. So that'll be useful.
All right. See, Michael, I can turn the lens around too. Batting cleanup before we take pictures. Did I put it back correctly? Is it-
There we go.
Oh, okay. All right. So those from home don't get to see my my lipstick, but the rest of you can see both the PowerPoint and me. I'm going to run through a lot of other stuff. I'll go briefly past some of the stuff that my colleagues have already covered, but want to give you an idea of a bunch of stuff that we haven't yet discussed. So for the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. You guys have all heard me say that 10 million times, and I truly am so proud to represent you and to reflect your values and your priorities in the Maryland State Senate. There are only 47 senators, and so it's important that our voice be represented and that our priorities be reflected in our legislative agendas. I gave many of you my 8-page letter. If you didn't get it at home, I'm happy. I have more here, and I'm happy to give you one. And I also have the best jar opener ever. So if you don't have one of those, see me. I'm happy to give you both. And you guys, that's the incentive for not watching live stream. So quick PowerPoint with thanks to my staff and interns that I'm going to run through fast. So it is a new day working with a governor and lieutenant governor who are allies. I was very proud to be the very first legislator outside of Baltimore City to endorse one of 10 candidates, a guy named Wes Moore, in the fall of 2021. So some people say, well, I endorsed him early and it was, April or May before the July primary. I endorsed him early and came out big. And according to his campaign, having a Jewish Democratic woman senator from Montgomery County come out so big and so visibly for him really helped move the needle and had a lot of people take a second look when he was at less than 1% in the polls. He says, I was at 1% in the polls, and that was probably a rounding error. And but he's extraordinary. And he and Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller have been partners and night and day in terms of collaboration, cooperation, and communication. So it's very exciting. And their cabinet is extraordinary. My committee, I've been vice chair of my standing committee. There are only 4 committees in Annapolis. That's 4 chairs and 4 vice chairs. Our committee was renamed and jurisdiction was changed. And I have a new chairman now, the senator from the district right next door, Brian Feldman, who's super smart and collaborative. And we just had a lot of success this year. So we jettisoned health occupations and alcohol bills. So we don't have alcohol day every year. And we brought in energy, which makes sense for energy and the environment to be in the same committee. So we are now education, energy, and the environment. And I always say, and elections. It's not one of the E's in the name of the committee, but it's super important, and we have jurisdiction there. It's a big part of what I work on. You're not going to be able to read all this, but the Maryland Democratic Caucus had priorities, as did the governor, as Delegate Palakovich Carr said. There were 10 priorities that the governor and lieutenant governor and their cabinet focused on. All 10 passed. Batting 1,000 is not something governors normally get to do, and yet he did, and they're all significant. Democrats accomplished a lot. The budget hasn't been discussed. It's a big deal and reflects policy priorities, $63 billion for education, transportation, healthcare, and many more priorities. Public safety. I think you all know that that I have been working on 911 related issues for the last 8 years. I think you've all heard me say that 3 people have died in our district when 911 has failed. And because of the commission I chaired, because of the legislation I've sponsored, Maryland is at the forefront nationally in terms of next generation 911. And there's a lot of policy that's important, but as a Senate colleague says, this 911 is literally life and death. And if grandma's having a heart attack, if your house is literally burning down, if a bad guy just robbed you, you need to be able to call 911 and have a trained person, a first responder. We talk about our first responders, police, fire, and paramedics, but without the first responders, the courageous women and men under the headset, without them being trained and ready with the knowledge and skill, we're not going to be able to get the support we need. I was really honored to have been presented with the national government leader. Thank you. The National 911 Government Leader of the Year by a national organization. There was a lovely event on Capitol Hill, and it was a thrill. And I'm now serving on a national 911 commission, and it's a thing. I'm afraid that it's going to be, people have said it's going to be on my tombstone. So I hope that's not soon. And I don't expect to have a tombstone because I'm going to be cremated, but in any case, not tomorrow. Gun violence is obviously hugely of concern to all of us. We just had the anniversary from 1993, when I was part of the lobbying team working with Jim and Sarah Brady to pass the Brady bill and the assault weapons ban. We need to pass national gun legislation. Joe Biden then, President Biden, then Senator Biden, was one of our key leaders, and it was an honor to work with him and his staff then. His leadership is clear on this issue. Congress is just not cooperating. So, but we've done stuff in Maryland, and we continue to pass smart legislation to try to keep our neighborhoods safe. Elections, as I said, that's in my committee. I kind of am at the forefront on election legislation. Last year, I passed 3 emergency bills on elections. The governor allowed, former governor Hogan allowed 2 of them to become law without his signature. The third one, which was arguably among the most important bills that we passed last year, he vetoed. And it was quite unexpected, quite irresponsible. Maryland is the only state in the country that didn't allow mail-in ballots to be counted until 2 days after Election Day. Well, when there was 3 or 4% mail-in ballots, kids at college or, had to go visit grandma in Dubuque last second or whatever, that wasn't such a big deal, except in a very close election. But when you're talking about 20, 25, 30% and higher and growing as mail-in ballots. The idea that we had hundreds of thousands of ballots that couldn't be touched was insane. So I strengthened the bill from what we passed last year, and it, rather than giving counties the option of starting to process early, it mandates that there has to be done. So 8 days before the start of early voting, our local boards of elections are going to be able to start making sure that they are qualified to be counted, opening, batching, scanning, but not tabulating. We don't want anyone to know the outcomes, so that won't happen until election day. But on election night, we're going to have a lot more data, so we'll have a sense as to who the winners are. Another bill that I passed this year that was signed into law last week was fixing our laws related to our state board of elections administrator. There was a law that was passed in 2005. President Miller, late President Miller, thought it was a good idea to sort of insulate the administrator, and that position is basically, I don't want to use the pun, I'm going to say bulletproof, but I don't mean that word. Obviously, it was insulated and protected in a way that was just irresponsible. All state employees should be accountable, and there should be transparent and accountable hiring and firing. And this was one job that was not that. So after 32, I think it's about the same time as you, Kumar, 30 something years in office, maybe not quite that long. Linda Limon, the state administrator, with whom I have feuded and I've had some challenges with, finally put in notice, and the state board is working on a very transparent process to interview and hire a new administrator, and I'm really excited about that. We are getting new voting machines for 2026. That procurement process needs to be transparent. Delegate Vogel and I worked on that. We're bringing it back next year. A lot more to do. Others have already talked about reproductive freedom. Maryland on the ballot next year. You're going to be able to make sure that you vote for reproductive choice so that women can choose to vote. When the Dobbs decision came out, there were a lot of us that went down to the Supreme Court with homemade signs, and I was very proud. So now and always, our bodies, our choice. On the flip side, and I kept doing, on the other side with Maryland colors, I had Maryland proudly pro-choice, and we are, and we will continue to be, and welcome women from other states who don't have to. You all voted for cannabis legalization, adult use cannabis legalization, and on July 1st, that becomes an option. But we had to address a framework to make sure that there was inclusion and diversity in our suppliers. And I ended up sponsoring 2 floor amendments. I thought the bill had some flaws. Primarily, the big concern was about funding. All the funding was going to counties. And if they are located in Gaithersburg, in Rockville, in city limits, it would be the city paying for the added law enforcement, for loitering, for enforcement and trash and cleanup and just all of the things. And that seemed insane. So I sponsored an amendment, and they were taking no floor amendments, but by talking about it publicly and putting some pressure on and having some of my colleagues say, yeah, what she says, she's right. We got that fixed. Before I leave cannabis, I just want to say that the other amendment, and really a big issue that I have been working on for several years with Montgomery County's drug recognition expert, who is nationally known, about DUID, driving under the influence of drugs. In every state where recreational cannabis has been legalized, you see increases in people driving under the influence and serious accidents and fatalities. And I am terrified that we will see that in Maryland. So it's something I'm going to be monitoring, something I'm going to be continuing to work on. There is technology. Obviously, if you drive while drunk, right, you have the walking test and the breathalyzer and all that. There is technology, and there's an oral swab. Think about a Q-tip sort of rubbing the inside of your cheek. You put it in a little little handheld device, and within 5 minutes, it prints out the drug levels of cannabis, opioids, methamphetamines, and others. And so we need to be able to make sure that our roadways are not more safe, more unsafe than they are now. So going to be watching that. The blueprint for Maryland's future, Delegate Palakovich Carr already mentioned. I was vice chair of the committee when we passed that. It's a big deal. One of my concerns always is language accessibility. We know that Gaithersburg and Rockville are among the most linguistically diverse in the nation. And so how do we make sure that non-native English speakers are included in our public schools and making sure that those students can be successful? 529, prepaid college tuition. You have a baby, so Julian might want to go to college someday and you want to start saving up for his education. There were 2 different plans. One is fine. One became a hot mess. We heard a lot of heartbreaking testimony. Our state treasurer that we vote for, you don't vote for, but he's the former House colleague of ours, Derek Davis, is now our state treasurer, and he is super smart and diligent, and his folks are going to be working on addressing that and prioritizing those students who are going to school imminently, either are in now or going to school this fall or something, so that parents and families can make sure that the funds that they've invested are available to cover their tuition. Environment, Kumar already covered. Nonprofit sector, I am often called the senator for the nonprofit sector. Last year, I had 3 nonprofit bills that all passed the Senate unanimously, and all 3 of them died in the House when they ran out of time. This year, we passed 2 of them, and so I thank my House colleagues. Once again, we passed them unanimously. I created a fund back in 2017 called NIMBLE, the Nonprofit Interest-Free Micro Bridge Loan, and it's for nonprofits that have grants or contracts with federal, state, county, or municipal governments, and there's been a delay in paying, and the delays are extraordinary. I'll get to that in a second. And but they have to make payroll, and so this up to $25,000 available through this program. And so this year we finally passed more funding. And so this will be, there was a wait list because there wasn't enough funding. So we got more funding on that. So that one. Second, thank you, Cece. Second, I have passed prompt payment parity. Everyone always says, oh, we got to help our small businesses, which is true. We have to help our small businesses, but it's small businesses and our nonprofits, which are in every county, every legislative district, and too often we take them for granted. And if all the battered women's shelters, homeless shelters, food pantries, literacy councils, arts organizations, if they all close their doors because they didn't have funding, either government would have to pick them up or our communities would be worse off. So, but we don't give them the respect. So, so I had a witness who told the story of needing to get a second mortgage on her personal home because of a delay that was extraordinary in getting the money that the government owed for her nonprofit. And that was so she could make payroll, so her staff could pay their bills. That won't happen anymore. And thanks to our comptroller, Brooke Learman, and others, and Maryland nonprofits, we got that through, and it's going to make a difference. Kumar and I worked together on a revolving loan fund for nonprofits to allow them to get funding for solar panels, geothermal, or wind power, whatever's right for them, but allowing nonprofits who need to keep their money into their mission to get access to funding. And when I told Jamie Raskin about this 2 years ago, he thought it was such a great idea that it actually got included in federal legislation. So it is a federal program, not yet a Maryland program. Healthcare, the biggest thing that I want to talk about was a bill again that I got out of the Senate last year, but didn't make it out of the House. But this year it made it out and it is signed into law. Maryland is 50th, dead last among states for the long waiting times to get seen in an emergency room. Why is that? I mean, and you wouldn't think that, right? In Maryland, we're awesome. We have a shortage in healthcare. And one of the reasons we have a shortage is because of the way it is, because the law used to be that you had to be an American citizen in order to be a healthcare worker and to be licensed. So We educate folks K-12 in our public schools, and we pay for dreamers and immigrants with that. Then we give them in-state tuition to go to our schools. We give them legislative scholarships. And then they're qualified, they're ready to work, they're ready to start their career, and we slam the door in their face. 14 other states have some variety of a law that allows them, and now Maryland has a cutting edge law that will allow people to come from other countries to be a nurse, to be a doctor, to be a veterinarian, or who are here and they're not yet citizens, but they want to serve as healthcare workers. We have to address our healthcare shortage. So that will happen. I know you're clapping at home too for all of these really good bills. More inclusive community, trans health equity was really important, and we got that passed this year, and that is now law. It is extraordinary. In other states, you know, we have the don't say gay and the we won't, you know, trans folks don't exist and we hate people who don't fit our little boxes and all that stuff. And in Maryland, we are being inclusive and accepting and loving. And I'm very proud of our state. Consumer protection legislation is really hard to pass because the high-powered, high-paid lobbyists tend to be against consumers. So I'm just flagging one of the consumer protection bills. I think I had 4 of them this year. We have all pulled in, and look at this slide. You see the big sign, and this is obviously an outdated, if only gas were that price anymore. But you see how huge sign in neon with a price, and you go, whoa, that's really cheap gas. So you pull in and you see in the unlit below the sign, it says cash. So 90 something percent across, according to AAA, 90+% of Marylanders pay for gasoline with credit or debit. But Maryland law in our law books requires the posting of the lowest price, which is the cash price. So less than 10% of the customers are going to be paying that price, but that's the one they get to advertise. That's crazy. So what you see is on the ground in this slide, on the ground, not illuminated, and you're not even going to see it as you're driving, right? It's beneath you, it says credit price. And this isn't even the worst of them. There are somewhere it's 25 cents more per gallon if you use your credit or debit. I think that's an outrage. I want to give props to Council Member Gabe Albornoz, who worked with me, 10 of the 11 county council members, including Council Member Lorianne Sales. I decided if I can't get this done and moving on the state level, that I'm going to use the pattern that we did for styrofoam when I sponsored the styrofoam ban. Is it wasn't moving statewide, so we got it banned in Montgomery, Prince George's, Annapolis, Baltimore City, blah, blah, blah. And then by the time we brought it back to Annapolis, they said, oh, yeah, our restaurants didn't go out of business. I guess this is an okay thing. So in the same way, so Council Member Lorianne Sales and the entire council unanimously voted to ban this crazy bait and switch practice in Montgomery County, and it was signed into law. I have council members. I have started calling council members in other counties, and I am hoping we are going to expand this and then bring it back and get it done statewide. So say something, consider calling the Office of Consumer Affairs or the Attorney General's office. At the hearing, I presented a stack of consumer complaints. And if you paid a nickel or a dime more and then at a gas station and you were ticked off, and then you stopped at several other places and ran errands and picked up your child from childcare and went to the grocery store and picked up dinner and all stuff, and you got home and you were still ticked off enough that you found the Attorney General's complaint site and filled out a form, people are ticked about this. They don't like it. All right. Local projects, as always, we bring back a lot of money for projects in Gaithersburg and Rockville, as well as funding for schools in the county and in our district. That list is on my letter and on my website, if you are not aware. This is a slide that we just added the other day because I just got an email from the Maryland Municipal League that I have been given the very high honor of being named a municipal superstar again this year. And there are really just a handful of those. And so it's really Hence I'm very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville and to be the municipal senator. Scholarships. We give out tens of thousands of dollars in scholarship money. As a matter of fact, my volunteer scholarship selection committee is meeting this week to help to score and interview in person our finalists and then distribute that money. Barry Jackson, you are now on that committee, so thank you for your service. But the stories are so inspiring and our students are so extraordinary. So if you know young people or are a person, not necessarily young, of any age, graduate school or undergraduate, we give away a lot of money. So make sure you're informed about that and spreading the word. I'm hiring staff and interns, full-time, part-time, blah, blah, blah. So see me if you might be interested in that. My podcast, Kibitzing with Kagan. Brief conversations with people I find fascinating. And I have all my interns who do the research. And now that session is over, I have shifted from legislative leaders and advocates to cabinet secretaries. And as I said earlier, the Moore Miller administration has an extraordinary cabinet and each is more impressive than the rest. And they are diverse. They are 50% women. They are people of color. They are people of diverse backgrounds, and they are amazing. So if you haven't subscribed, hope you'll go to my YouTube channel. I'm also, they're all available also on Apple Podcasts, but it's kind of fun to watch the interaction on my YouTube channel if you are interested. And I'm all over social media. Some people think, I was tweeted at, like, tell your staff to do blah, blah, blah. To be clear, I do all of my own tweets, all of my own posts, all of this. I don't produce the podcast, but I tape them and, but they help crop them and produce them and then I post them and whatever. But other than that, I have 5 Facebook pages, 2 Twitter accounts, 2 YouTube channels and an Instagram page and they're all mine. So check me out there. And with that, it is time for questions and thank you for being here. Let's go back and forth. Michael's gonna monitor the questions in the chat online, but let's start here in the room and we will just go back and forth. And thank you all again for being here. I'm talking to the people at home. We're really glad you're here. So Julie, Cece, Carl. Julie, go ahead.
Thank you for questions. I have to go, so thank you for questions. So thank you for bringing back all the money, especially for the public school capital improvement. We are very grateful. Our schools are in need for capital projects. So thank you so much. Now, I appreciate the
You
whole
should say your name. So this is Julie Yang from the Montgomery County School Board of Ed.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Julie
And
Yang.
brief questions.
Yeah, Julie Yang, Board of Education. Thank you. Appreciate the delegate and Senator bring back the capital project money to our public schools in Gaithersburg and Rockville. Now, I appreciate the whole delegation bringing back money. Right now, the money you bring back is about $5,293 per student. I want to ask, there's a perception in Annapolis that maybe need to be changed, that we have a greater need in our public schools. Just 2 weeks ago, I visited a high school that it told me that it has, last year, you have 38 English as a second language students. And this year it has over 130. Okay. So please, I know you're working hard, but put in the plug. Let's work together to bring more money back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, Cece Grant.
Hi, I'm Cece Grant. I am on the Montgomery County.
You're gonna have to speak really loudly.
Cece Grant on the Montgomery County Central Committee. First, as someone who's worked for a nonprofit for over a decade, huge thanks to you, Senator. That's amazing. I am a weird person who is very interested in the public service commissions. So thank you. I'm super excited you're taking on this position. I want to talk to you about inclusive utility finance. As you know, there are several states across the country who are making access for inclusive utility financing. overwhelmingly, a lot of them in red states, which is surprising to me. And so I wanted to put it on your radar as you move into your next position. I think something like only 1% of homes have have gone through the process of weatherization, energy efficiency, access to solar because of the huge upfront costs, right? And so as a pay-as-you-save and inclusive utility, what do is it has the utilities pay for the weatherizations and energy efficiencies upfront, and then the homeowner or renter pays with it for on-bill financing. And so it makes it a lot easier for a lot more people to access these energy efficiency.
So totally important. I'm going to suggest if there are PSC questions, Kumar can stick around a few minutes, but you should speak to it generally and then let's.
Well, let me understand your question, because we have an Empower Maryland program. Are you saying that people of lower income and people in underserved communities are having difficulty accessing the Empower program?
What I see in Maryland is that there are loans, not, you know, and so with the loans, first of all, you have to qualify through having good credit. And then you have to pay, you know, all of this up front. With the utility, because of utility programs, you pay for it on your utility bill. And so it's a much lower cost barrier to cost. And it's being passed at the legislative and PSC level. So if anyone is interested, I have lots and lots of information.
Okay, well, just grab one of my cards and let's be in touch. Okay.
Thank you. So we have a lot of questions here and a lot at home. So, and I don't think we've rented the room for all afternoon. So let's abbreviate our questions a little bit and no campaign speeches and just quick questions on legislative stuff. Carl and then Art.
Hi, I'm Carl Van Est. I'm a District 17 resident. Senator Kagan, how do you feel about our delegate appointment process where over 30% of the people in Annapolis were appointed? And the fact that Delegate Vogel is running for Congress after only serving one of his 4 sessions? Thank you.
Okay, you addressed it to me, so I will answer that. So I personally prefer election of leaders to selection of leaders. There is legislation that has been pending in Annapolis. It hasn't moved. I have co-sponsored it. I agree with it. Delegate Palakovich Carr carried it this year, last year. Do you want to speak to this too?
Sure.
Okay, let's hand it to Julie. But
Yeah, I mean, our state's constitution is very clear. We don't have special elections for legislative offices. It is the central committee who appoints. So there has been legislation for a number of years. Republicans have sponsored it, Democrats have sponsored it for years, it has passed the Senate a couple times. So you've actually voted for it a couple times to have special elections for legislative vacancies, but the House has not moved it. The legislation was reintroduced this year. I didn't carry it, didn't move. I had kind of an alternate approach because even under that bill, there would still be appointments as you got further into a term to try to tighten up the appointment process. Our central committee does a very good job, has kind of set the standard for the rest of the state, but other Democratic central committees, Republican central committees are not as transparent, do not have the public involvement that we do here in Montgomery County. And I wanted to raise the bar for everybody in terms of that, but that also did not move, unfortunately.
yes, from the district next door. I'm going to speak to the second part of your question, and then because you named him specifically, I'm going to have Joe speak as well. Joe Vogel didn't mention it, but he has announced his candidacy to succeed David Trone in the 6th district in Congress. I believe in democracy. I think people can run for what they're allowed to run for. I love Joe. I have not endorsed him or anyone, and we have a year, and it's going to be a long process, and he brings intelligence and energy, and I want him in District 17. I want him in the House of Delegates, and the voters of the 6th district will decide, and he will decide, and they will decide. Joe, do you want to say more than that?
Yeah, I'm fully focused for the next year on my job as delegate. Sorry. And that's the priority. I want everyone to make sure, I want to make sure to communicate that. And right now we're talking about legislation and about my job here as delegates. We're going to stay focused on that, but appreciate the comments there.
All right.
So I'm Dr. Art Lawler, retired physician in Montgomery County. And Vermont just removed its residency requirement for medically assisted dying. So Marylanders can go up to Vermont now and they don't have to go all the way to Oregon. But why the heck shouldn't we have it here anyway? I thought it was going to come up this year. It did not. Can we make some kind of commitment to bring that into the legislature and get it passed in the next year?
Thank you. Thank you for asking. So whether you call it death with dignity, right to die, assisted suicide, end of life options, everybody calls it something different. I am an enormous proponent, and you have been a wonderful leader. The folks at Asbury and around District 17 have been visible and active. If you haven't watched any of my podcasts, any of my kibitzing with Kagan, I encourage you to find the one with Dan Diaz. His wife, Brittany, and her death was chronicled on the cover of People magazine, and it is heartbreaking. And the fact that I wasn't sobbing throughout our video was a little bit astonishing. So this year, as you have heard, we did abortion, we did cannabis, we did trans, we had a lot of big bills, and we had a new administration. So above my pay grade, the decision was made not to move that bill in this session. I am optimistic, fingers crossed, that next year it will be back before us. If you may or may not remember that a few years ago, the bill passed the House, and Kumar and Julie, you both were co-sponsored, supported, and I'm a co-sponsor, strong supporter. To me, it's kind of being pro-choice. It's my body, it's my decision, and there should be safeguards for people with disabilities and safeguards for transparency and accountability and health diagnosis and all of the things. The House passed it a few years ago, and in the Senate, it was one of my colleagues who's a lovely senator who decided not to vote. And even though he was in the chamber, which is against Senate rules, and in our 47 member body, it failed on a tie vote, 23-23, with him sitting in his seat. It was very frustrating. So this year we've got we picked up a couple of Democratic seats. We have an administration that is supportive and will ally with us on this, unlike the Hogan administration. One of the fears was that Governor Hogan would have vetoed the bill. So I am really hopeful, Art, that next year Maryland will join the ranks. And it's not just Oregon. There are a number of other states. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it's something like, does anyone else know? It's a number of states. I don't want to say the wrong number.
2 states that will take out of state field, just like we're.
Okay. Yeah.
They'll take this.
There you go. Okay. But there are 7, 8, 9 states, something that allow it now. And Dan Diaz told the story about relocating from California to move with Brittany once her brain tumor was completely inoperable and all that. And they had to move to Oregon, find new doctors and all that. It is just not okay. So speak up, speak out on this issue. We've got to get that done. So thank you for the question. Thank you for your advocacy. Appreciate that. Let's take one online. And as Michael starts to get that up, Nancy, do you want to do briefly, and then we'll go one online while Michael is checking that out. Okay. All right.
Thanks, everybody, very much for your service. Maryland's a wonderful state to live in. I chair the Rockville Bike
Nancy
Advisory.
Breen.
Oh, sorry. My
Rockville
name is
Bicycle.
Nancy Breen. I chair the Rockville Bike Advisory Committee. And I wanted to bring to your attention that Rockville has been tracking the crashes and fatalities. And as you probably already know, most of them are on state roads. And Rockville doesn't have control of the state roads to be able to change that. So what can we do, or what are you doing? Part of this is at the administration, I'm sure, but are there things that can be done through the legislature in order to create multimodal situations on those state highways so that we can have bikes and peds and cars rather than just cars? Thank you.
Okay. Delegate Palakovich Carr has been a great leader on this. Kumar briefly, and then Julie.
Okay, I was just going to say that most of this legislation goes through the Environment and Transportation Committee. It's always a heavy lift to change the law with respect to the rules of the road, although Julie has been working on this for many years and has been very effective. So let me just back off and let her answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, Nancy, you and the committee have been great allies in this. I mean, honestly, a lot of the state does not look like our district or Montgomery County. A lot of my colleagues can't fathom walking or biking somewhere. They literally never have. I think we need to be encouraging more people to get out and to experience what it's like for people who are choosing that or out of economic necessity, don't have a car and are relying on public transit or walking or biking. Actually, one of the bills that we passed last year that I sponsored is just going into effect, and I'm hoping is going to make a difference. And that is more disclosure around pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities on state roadways. And it's specific to that. As of about a month ago, the State Department of Transportation has been posting their analyses of what went wrong. And actually, I checked a few days ago, and there is at least one report in District 17 that's been posted at this point. But trying to provide more details about, like, is there a adequate sidewalk, lighting, crosswalk? Is there repairs that need to be made? I think there's still a lot of room for improvement in terms of what they're disclosing, but at least it's something that we can then get behind and say, look, you said there were deficiencies at this spot. Why aren't those getting fixed going forward?
Thank you, Delegate Palakovich, Carr, for your leadership on this. I am bringing the camera to the wonderful Michael Tardif, who's going to read. Why don't you read maybe 2 or 3 of the questions?
We've
and
got a couple of questions on widening 270 through Rockville.
Great.
One is asking what you'll do to stop the dreadful P3 project.
Okay, go ahead.
There's another question. Seniors are the fastest growing population in the county. For 15 years, the city of Gaithersburg has recognized the need for a new senior center. Is there any chance of funding a new center? And then I'll give you one more.
Yep.
Will the changes to the Forest Conservation Act help Gaithersburg protect existing forest? For example, a 1.6 acre forest grove at Lake Forest Mall.
Okay, great questions. Thank you to those of you who are at home. And we lost Council Member Spiegel, but to answer the Gaithersburg thing, but why don't you do forest conservation?
Yeah, sure.
Kumar?
With respect to the Forest Conservation Act, it will help City of Gaithersburg undertake its activities. The Forest Conservation Act gives a lot of opportunities for local government to weigh in, and so that should be fine. I-270. The I-270 program has been paused and it's being reevaluated. Let me just say something that's a little unpopular here. A lot of people have become very fixated on an opposition to toll lanes. Let me just say something. Tolling is one of the most effective mechanisms for traffic control and is supported by the vast majority of the environmental community. There is no better way to manage the way people choose when and where to drive than to have smartly designed toll lanes. And so I know there are a lot of people who are just very dead set against it. I have never taken an absolute position against toll lanes and those kind of, they call them Lexus lanes. I've never been opposed to this. And I think it's important for us to have all of these public policy tools available when we're talking about managing traffic.
So I love Kumar Barve, but I'm going to disagree with him at least a little bit on the 270 issue. I took the ICC home last night. I was at a concert in Columbia, had a great time, and it was late. And I look at the price and I weigh the difference between driving down 95 and taking the ICC to 270 to go home, or whether to go all the way down and around and up. And when it's after 11 and it's $1 and change, I'm like, all right, it feels like a splurge though, when it's more than that. And I drive a used Ford Fiesta. So the Lexus is like, not even aspirational. It's just, that's not my budget. And the idea that the Hogan plan, which was hatched with no consultation with us, and it was announced at a press conference on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and we were informed of it the day before. That's how little respect and little consultation there was with Montgomery County legislators. And so from the beginning, the tone was terrible, the ideas were terrible, and it was this public-private partnership, which sounds like nice, the public and the private working together, but the tolls could be $50 each way, each time you took it. And I don't know about you, but that's not in my budget on any given day, ever. So that has been scrapped. I testified over and over before the Board of Public Works. I was the only legislator who came out. I came out before in hearings they had in Rockville. And there were enough concerns raised about the environment, about the cost and other issues. One of the key issues that I talk about a lot, and in my kibitz with the Secretary Flora, the Department of Planning, is data. I don't think we have enough data for a post-pandemic commuting pattern. And I don't think we should be making plans and constructing roadways based on data from 2018, 2017, when we've had a 3-year pandemic and people are working from home now, a lot. Not everybody has that option and not everybody can do it every day. But even people who are working from home 2 or 3 days a week, that reduces our traffic jams. So Secretary Wiedefeld, the former head of Metro, is our cabinet secretary. I trust his people to come up with the need for traffic amelioration without the insane tolls and the impact on our environment. So that's that. The third question that Michael read to us was about a new Gaithersburg Senior Center. When we ask for money from the state, it is based on requests that we get. So if the Gaithersburg Mayor and Council, and if you are watching, if the Gaithersburg Mayor and Council ask us for money for a new senior center, that is something that I suspect we would prioritize. But to my knowledge, you guys heard, I've never heard about any request of that. So, so ask your Mayor and Council to ask us for that, and we'd be happy to look at that. So, yes, Paul. And we're just going to take a few more questions. I think we have to.
I think we can take one more and then we're gonna be out of time.
Sure, I'll be very quick. Paul Scott, again, congratulations on the issue of healthcare. That's just a big issue. Question, any future as far as workforce training, and then even tying in to some of the efforts that Governor Westmore wants to do as far as service as it pertains to healthcare. Just love to hear your thinking on that going forward. And then a second issue, I'm on the Transportation and Mobility Commission for the City of Rockville. Curb cuts along state roads, that's a big issue. Nancy, she just stepped out. We've been talking, Kathleen, who chairs our commission, just your work on that and just where that's going statewide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Was there, if there are 1 or 2 more questions, we'll take them at the same time. Ross? One of our wonderful precinct chairs.
Hi, I'm not the precinct chair. In fact, I'm Rosalind Mera, and I am probably one of 3 people in this room who is not an elected official, or and I don't even aspire to be one. All right, but I do volunteer a lot with the Central Committee and others on Democratic. So I have a very quick question. I don't know whether any of you follow Nextdoor, the Nextdoor app, but if you do, it's like full of, tales of woe and crime, and you'd think that this was the most crime-laden, city and county in the whole of the country. Okay, so I never see any response from that. So anything is being addressed about crime?
Last question, and then we're going to speak to all 3 of them.
Hi, I'm Thomas Jackson. I am very new to the county. I actually just moved here in February from Frederick, and I know Frederick people will say the transition moves the other way, but I'm here to fix that trend. But no, I just wanted to say, I think we had some great questions about healthcare. I work in public health, so the physician and nurse shortage is very near and dear to my heart. I just wanted to ask of each of you that you please consider in the future to reduce that shortage, to consider what you can do to increase the number of medical residencies that are available here in Maryland, just because that is a legislative thing. There are legislative limits to medical residencies. A lot of that can be done at the federal level, but some can be done at the state level as well. So I would just ask that you please consider that in the future.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll start, but I'm going to toss it to my colleagues as well. Paul, thank you for your interest in the newest department, cabinet department. I had a wonderful meeting with Secretary Monteiro, who is a dynamo. I just think he's going to do great things. public service, community service is something that Governor Moore, candidate Moore, talked about everywhere. And I hope you heard him say it at least 400 times as I did. He said service is sticky. And if you do it when you're, just graduated from high school or just got your GED or within your first 3 years out, then it's you create relationships and commitment to community that last your whole life. And so the legislation came out of my committee. I'm very proud of it. He actually honored me with asking me to be on his kitchen cabinet when we just had our kitchen cabinet meeting on Thursday, and just super smart people. And he is open and collaborative and all that. And as the senator for the nonprofit sector, I'm all about service and having a service year option. And so it's not just going to be nonprofits. I hope that we're able to get some of these folks into our high tech corridor and into the environment and into public safety and give serve where they will be inspired to serve. So that is totally a big deal. Next door, Roz, I'm not going to speak to that. I find it annoying. I am signed in, but it's not geographically targeted enough, and there are whiners and hysteria and all that. And whenever I weigh in, the ugly troll type things start coming in. And so I actually have thought about unsubscribing. I wish it was moderated or managed in a better way, because I think it has the potential to be a good tool. Do any of you guys engage on Nextdoor?
Oh, God.
Joe? I wish it were. Joe, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, well, can I touch on the other questions as well?
Sure, absolutely.
So first on the Nextdoor front, I don't use Nextdoor either, but we do have to acknowledge that there has been a rise in crime. And I know that Senator Kagan has been working on the issue. We keep talking about shortages, and there are shortages when it comes to law enforcement officers as well. I was at the Cabin John Shopping Center around 10:30. I was doing a CVS run a few months ago, and there had been a car that had been T-boned, right, a hit and run. And they had been waiting. There was these 3 teenagers. They'd been waiting at that point for over an hour for law enforcement to arrive. So I started calling. They're like, we just don't have anyone to send right now. And that is a terrifying reality, right? So as we're talking about the issue of crime, and there are a ton of different factors that lead to that slight rise in crime that we're seeing, but we also have to address that shortage of law enforcement. On the healthcare piece, I know that on the residency piece in particular, I know that there are efforts to expand the number of residency options, particularly in rural parts of the state, that I think are really exciting. Definitely something to continue to look at. And on the healthcare piece, something that I've been really focused on is the recruitment of mental health professionals. And I know I mentioned that earlier, but as we're having that conversation, I want you to know that that's a piece that I'm really focused on, because even those that if you don't have insurance and you don't have access to mental health care, even people that do have insurance have a very hard time getting access to mental health care, getting a psychologist, just because of the shortage and the long wait time. So I hope that was a sufficient answer to all 3 of those questions. I'm going to pass it to my colleagues.
Yeah, I'll just touch on the curb cut piece and the ADA compliance piece. If there are concerns about particular intersections, don't hesitate to reach out to us. If it's a state roadway, we can try to work that angle with the Department of Transportation. Some of the roads are county or municipal. I know there is a number of proactive kind of retrofits happening in intersections throughout the district from all of those entities, but every intersection hasn't been touched yet. So just let us know.
So we are way longer than we thought we might be. And to me, that reflects the passion and the interest in being Democrats, in working on progressive policies, and in being well informed. And so unless do you guys want 60 seconds each, like literally on a timer to wrap up?
Yeah.
Okay, 60 seconds. We'll do reverse order. Kumar, you go first.
Yeah, I just want to talk very quickly about something that has bugged me with respect to public policy, and that is with respect to housing. There is no substitute for building more places for people to live. The advocates always like to tout rent control, which I personally believe is an economic disaster that even communist economists oppose, and others. But look, here's the thing. Nobody can, I know our county executive says there are thousands of apartment buildings in the pipeline. You can't live in in an apartment building in pipeline. You have to have apartments, townhouses. The one thing we need less of are single family homes. We've got plenty of those. We need to densify housing. We need to do it everywhere. And until that happens, we will continue to be like New York, Portland, Seattle, San Francisco. We'll be a state where there aren't enough places for people to live affordably. Ironically, two of the cities that are way ahead in housing, Houston and Dallas, Texas. Why? Because they don't have zoning laws, which I'm not in favor of going to that. I'm not in favor of going to that extreme, but that's instructive.
Julie.
Yeah, well, thank you all again for your interest and your participation. Never hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can do to be of service or that we just need to know about. Certainly some new things brought to our attention today, and we appreciate that. I'll just put a really brief plug in terms of my scholarship program. All right, I think we're taking applications for another week or so. If you know anyone who might be interested in that, just need to be a resident of our district, generally attending an in-state institution. We do have an income cap, but could be for a trade school, Montgomery College, or any other level of higher education. Thanks again.
Thank you all so much for being here. Something I feel really strongly about is that the legislation that I'm pushing for really originates from conversations in the community. The big mental health relief bill, our student debt relief bill, that originated from a conversation I was having with someone through their window while knocking on some doors, right? So that really matters to me. So never hesitate to reach out with an idea. You can just email my office. We can find time to meet. But know that your priorities are my priorities, and I'm fighting for you all in Annapolis. So thank you all so much.
All right, and with that, thank you again to Ellie Shaw-Belblidio. We're sorry she's not here now. Thank you to everyone who is a thoughtful, engaged, democratic voter and activist. We need you. We appreciate you. We see you. Visit us in Annapolis. Be in touch with us during the interim. Spread the word about our scholarships. Follow us on social media. And thank you for turning out. If any of you have an extra minute to help us stack chairs and stuff since we're over time, that would be appreciated. And thank you again to Michael Tardif of the Democratic Center Committee.